Hi there. It's time for another episode of Rocks with Russ. In this episode, we're going to look at metamorphic rocks as we once again try to understand the grammar that makes up the language of the rocks. So, metamorphic rocks are rocks that form from the application of heat, pressure, or the passing through the rock of hydrothermal fluids, all of which will alter the rock in terms of its texture and even mineral composition. Metamorphic rocks tend to be, especially when we talk about under pressure, there's various kinds of pressure that a rock can be under. So it can be under pressure from two directions or from multiple directions at one time. And if you're only talking about pressure, you're talking about situations that are at great depth. And so it's important to note, though, that these rocks never melt. If they were to melt, then they'd be igneous rocks when they recrystallize. So these are rocks that are under a great deal of pressure, but they aren't melting. So it's important to know that that's really, really critical. So they're under enough pressure that the minerals are able to move around. And then when they do that, and they're under directional pressure in particular, you can end up with foliations. All right, foliations are banding of minerals. And when the minerals begin forming into bands, of course, then you get this sort of a texture. Okay. Now, foliation isn't always obvious. Foliation sometimes is something that you have to experience. You have to experience it enough times to be able to really recognize it. Other rocks, like this, is a gneiss, right? And this gneiss also has inside of it large chunks of minerals that are indicative of the metamorphic environment in which this one formed. This is from upstate New York, from an old garnet mine, and these are the garnets they were mining for at the time, and to put into glass lenses and things of that nature, and to use as abrasives. All right, but these garnets formed in place in this rock under pressure, and probably also some heat. But here we go. So here's another more common example. This is a slate. It's not the flattest slate in the world, so it's almost a phyllite. But the idea here is that it's pretty flat. It's not as shiny on the outside, but you can kind of get a sense that it's just its flat nature is its first indication that it might be foliated. But then you can begin to look for some layering in here, and you'll see it. It's very fine. But slate has a parent rock. All of these rocks have parent rocks, and it likely formed from shale. Shale already has with it that sort of lenticular bedding situation we'll get to in the sedimentary rock video, or laminar bedding, however you want to refer to it, horizontal flat bedding. And when it gets metamorphosed, it turns into slate. Okay, slate is the first step of a number of steps. As you apply more and more pressure, you can eventually get to a gneiss. So we can talk about how much metamorphism has gone on. We can look at slate. Then we can look at schist. This is another one. This schist is full of muscovite, so it's a mica schist. I have another schist here that's also got some crystals in it. This schist has minerals in it, garnet among other things, that formed during the process. These are, again, the garnets are formed during the metamorphism, so they're considered to be a result of that. So they're a secondary mineral formation, and so anyway, these are intermediate stages on their way over to a gneiss. Okay, so this is increasing metamorphic grade, so lower pressures all the way up to higher pressures. Okay, or in lower temperatures all the way up to higher temperatures. So you're also looking at the combination of the two. Obviously, when you get at great depth, you also have greater temperatures. And so we have one other example here. This is from the Mount Washington area. Really nice piece of schist here. And so sometimes you also get additional interesting mineral structures. But this is typical of your metamorphic foliated rocks. So foliated rocks, again, have some kind of layering of the mineralogy. You do also have rocks that are non-foliated. These are the ones that you might be really familiar with some of them, like marble. Marble's not foliated. You might get bands of color through it occasionally, but it's not foliated. There's no layering, really. This is a chunk of quartzite. Quartzite is another non-foliated rock where there's no banding. And so the quartzite looks like a big chunk of quartz, essentially. But it's also really, really hard, of course, given the nature of quartz. But again, no banding. The minerals have not aligned. There's only one mineral in this particular rock, or maybe some other stuff in here, but primarily quartz. Okay, but yeah, some minerals don't lend themselves terribly well to the banding, and sometimes you'll have only one dominant mineral in it, and so there won't be a lot of obvious banding. But it's also the metamorphic processes that are occurring here that may prevent the banding. So the parent rock for a quartzite is a sandstone. So we take especially a coarse sandstone, and apply heat and pressure to it, you'll get this. Okay. And again, we talked about moving hydrothermal fluids through a rock. I don't have good examples of those, but hydrothermal alteration can occur as water moves through because of the heat and the minerals that are in the water causing alteration within the rock. Heat alone can cause metamorphism, and when heat alone does that, it's typically around a magma chamber area or something along those lines where there's really a big source of heat. And then, of course, if the rock that's right around that, we sometimes call it the country rock or the bedrock, right around it, they will form an aureole, is the term for that, where the alteration will begin to be most intense right around where the heat source is, and then begin to sort of fade out and grade as you get further and further out from the heat source. So, again, heat, pressure, hydrothermal fluids. There's no melting involved here. It's just alteration and so forth. It's kind of like baking bread in the oven, honestly. You put the dough in and you bake it, and it's not a liquid in any way, shape, or form, but it changes form a little bit and goes to a kind of metamorphism under heat. So there's actually a lot of good analogies we could talk about here. But all right, that's Metamorphic Rocks for now. Hope you've enjoyed this and gotten something out of it. Until next time, when we look at sedimentary rocks.